I still remember that night as if the lights were burned into my memory. The dining hall at the Midtown restaurant was glowing with gold chandeliers, polished cutlery, and the hum of polite conversation. It was supposed to be my graduation dinner, a moment to pause and breathe after years of late nights and endless shifts. I walked in wearing a suit that I had bought secondhand, pressed neatly, with my diploma still folded in my bag. My family had already claimed the long table at the center. My parents sat near the head, beaming as if the night were there, while my younger sibling, let's call her Claire, was draped across her chair like it was a throne. She wore a designer jacket I knew she hadn't paid for. My parents had. She had been given a brand new apartment in Brooklyn last spring, complete with stainless steel appliances and a concierge. She was the golden child, the one who had been told her whole life that her smile could open doors, and that money would never be a concern. I took my seat halfway down the table, sandwiched between two distant cousins who barely knew my name. I tried to ignore the way Claire flicked her hair and how my mother leaned toward her with every word she spoke. When the waiter poured water, I took a sip to steady myself. Tonight was supposed to be my night, wasn't it? Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat and said, "I've been offered an internship at a major financial firm downtown. It's competitive, hundreds applied, but I got the spot. It could change everything for me." My heart beat fast as I looked at them, waiting for some flicker of pride. But just then, Claire pulled out her phone. "Mom, look," she whined, holding up the screen with a dramatic sigh. My case cracked. "It looks awful. I cannot live with this. Everyone's going to see." The conversation swiveled as if I had never spoken. My father leaned forward immediately, nodding with concern. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll stop by tomorrow and get you the newest model. You shouldn't have to put up with something broken." My words hung in the air like smoke. I tried again. "About the internship. That's nice." My mother cut in, her voice distant, as if she were checking something off a grocery list. "You're responsible. You'll figure it out." That phrase, "you'll figure it out," was a refrain I had heard my entire life. It was the bandage they placed over every dismissal. Every time my needs were overshadowed by Claire's desires, my sister could fail a class, and tutors would be hired immediately. I could earn an honor, and they would forget before dessert. As I chewed my food, tasteless under the weight of the moment, I studied the hierarchy etched across the table. Claire, the star, glowing under attention. My parents, orbiting here, ensuring she never faced a sharp edge. And then me, useful, reliable, expected to stand on my own. The evening dragged on with laughter and toasts, none directed at me. Toward the end, a photographer approached to capture a family picture. I stood to join them, but Claire stopped me with a smirk. "Do we really need everyone in this one? It's my good side. Too many faces ruin the shot." The words stung, though she said them with the careless cruelty of someone who had never been told no. My father chuckled, waving me over anyway. But the moment was carved into me. Claire's whisper, sharp as glass, slipped into my ear as we leaned together for the picture. "You should be grateful we even let you in the family group photo." I held my smile for the camera, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Inside, something broke. It wasn't just envy. It was the realization that my achievements, my long nights at the library, my jobs, bussing tables, and tutoring math, were invisible to the people who should have cared most. That night, I stopped waiting for their applause. As we left the restaurant, my father patted Claire on the back, promising a shopping trip. While my mother fussed over her jacket, I trailed behind them, diploma still tucked in my bag. The city lights blinked above, neon promises of futures waiting to be claimed. And as the cab pulled away with them inside, leaving me on the curb to walk home alone, I whispered to myself, someday, they will see me. Not because they want to, but because I'll leave them no choice. That was the night the seed of revenge quietly rooted in me. I suppose every family has its unspoken rules, but in mine the rules were carved deep, like lines on stone. If you wanted attention, you had to sparkle. If you wanted to be heard, you had to be Claire. I remember stepping into that Midtown restaurant as if I were stepping onto a stage where my role had already been cast. The chandeliers above sparkled, and the waiters glided across the floor with trays of champagne flutes. The air carried that blend of roasted garlic and perfume that only an expensive dining hall can hold. This was supposed to be my graduation dinner. My degree was not just a piece of paper, it was proof of years of sacrifice, late nights, endless jobs, and a quiet determination to pull myself upward. Yet from the moment I walked in, it was clear the spotlight had already been claimed. Claire sat draped in her chair, a silk scarf loose around her neck. Her nails painted a color I could never afford. She had a way of acting as though the world owed her comfort. And my parents never dared prove her wrong. She had been given an apartment in Brooklyn, complete with a balcony view and a concierge who greeted her by name. She had been given a luxury car for her 21st birthday. And when the insurance lapsed after one of her accidents, my parents quietly covered it. I was seated halfway down the long table, close enough to see the smiles aimed her way, but far enough that conversation drifted past me like smoke. I wore a suit bought secondhand, carefully pressed, my diploma tucked in a leather folder at my side. Midway through the meal, after picking at a plate of salmon I had barely tasted, I gathered my courage. I cleared my throat and said, I wanted to share some good news. I was offered an internship at a major financial firm downtown. It's competitive, and hundreds applied, but I got it. It could be the first step toward a real career. My heart thudded in my chest. For a moment, I let myself hope. But right then, Claire let out a theatrical gasp, holding up her phone as though she were unveiling a tragedy. Look at this crack on my screen, she moaned, pushing the device toward my mother. This is humiliating. Everyone will see. I cannot live like this. As if summoned, my father leaned closer with a frown of sympathy. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll get you the newest model tomorrow. You shouldn't have to suffer with something broken. The conversation swiveled, all eyes on her, as if I had never spoken. My words floated in the air. Unheard. I tried again. Soft but insistent. About the internship? That's nice. My mother said, her tone dismissive, her eyes already scanning Claire's screen. You're responsible. You'll figure it out. I had heard those 4 words all my life. You'll figure it out. They were a door slammed shut, a signal that my struggles were mine alone to carry. When Claire skipped classes, tutors were hired. When she failed a test, excuses were made. When I earned honors, the news barely made it past the kitchen table. As I sat there, pushing food across my plate, I saw the family order of things laid bare. Claire, the shining star, my parents, revolving around her like planets pulled by gravity, and me, the dependable one, expected to keep moving forward with no applause, no recognition, only the vague assurance that I was responsible. The evening stretched long, filled with laughter that didn't belong to me. When the waiter brought dessert, a photographer approached. Shall we take a family picture, he asked. I rose, eager at least to stand beside them, to leave with one small token of the night. But Claire's smirk cut me before I reached the group. Do we really need everyone in this shot? She said. Too many faces ruin the balance. And it's my good side. The photographer hesitated, his polite smile wavering. My father chuckled nervously, motioning me over anyway. But as I leaned in, Claire's whisper slid into my ear, soft enough for only me. You should be grateful we even let you in. The family group photo. The flash of the camera froze my smile, but inside, something cracked. It wasn't envy. Not exactly. It was the sharp ache of being invisible to the people who were supposed to see me most clearly. My years of tutoring, bussing tables, and coding late at night, none of it mattered. My internship, which I had fought tooth and nail to earn, was nothing compared to a cracked phone screen. After the photo, I stepped back, the weight of it pressing hard in my chest. My father promised Claire a shopping trip. My mother fussed over her jacket, and I trailed behind as we left the restaurant. They slid into a cab, their laughter spilling out as the door shut. I stood on the curb alone, diploma in hand, the neon lights of the city flickering above me. I could have hailed another cab, but I walked instead, my shoes tapping against the pavement, each step steady with something new. That night, beneath the glow of the city, I whispered a vow to myself, not out of spite, but out of a need as deep as hunger. One day, they will see me, not because they want to, but because I'll leave them no choice. The seed was planted quietly, deep inside. It would take betrayal, loss, and anger to water it, but it would grow, and it would change everything. The weeks after that dinner, I tried to bury myself in plans for the future. My internship was set to begin, and I had a clear path mapped one summer of hard work. Then graduate school. What kept me steady was the knowledge that my education fund, carefully built and guarded, would carry me through. That fund was no small thing. I had worked every job I could find since high school, stacking shelves, tutoring algebra, coding small websites for local businesses. Every dollar went into that account. By the time I walked across the graduation stage, I had saved $23,000. The rest, $15,000, came from my grandparents. They had placed it in a trust, structured carefully through the bank so my parents could act as custodians until I was of age. My grandmother called it my ticket out, pressing the envelope into my hand with a smile. "Promise us you'll walk across that stage," she had said, her eyes bright. He had promised, believing in the certainty of it. The total was $38,000, enough for tuition, rent, and perhaps even a small cushion against emergencies. It was not wealth by any measure, but it was mine, hard-won, sweat-earned, and gifted with love. One morning, in late July, I logged into the account. I was preparing to transfer funds for the first semester. My hand stilled on the mouse when the screen loaded. The balance read $2,100. He blinked, refreshed, blinked again. The number did not change. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the statement. Withdrawals leapt out like blows. 3,000 here, 4,000 there, 2,000 pulled in cash. Each one stamped with a date. Each one perfectly legal because my parents' names sat alongside mine on the paperwork. It was as though I were watching months of labor, years of sacrifice, vanish in tidy lines of digital ink. I went to the bank that afternoon. The teller, kind but helpless, explained that the transactions had been made with the secondary cardholder. In other words, my parents. The words rattled in my head as I left, my feet carrying me home without direction. I sat in my room for an hour, staring at the walls, trying to breathe. That evening, I heard their voices through the bedroom door. My mother's tone was sharp, brittle with fear. "The credit lines are maxed. David, the event business is sinking. The house payment is due again." My father sighed. "What choice do we have? Claire cannot afford another scandal. Those fines would ruin her future. We could use what's left of the fund." My mother whispered. I froze. "The fund? My fund?" A laugh followed. My father's voice low. "Good thing that boy is so responsible. He'll figure it out." Then, from the hallway above, Claire's voice chimed in. "Could you two keep it down? I'm planning our trip to Miami. Flights are outrageous this time of year." I pushed the door open. My parents startled, their faces pale in the dim lamplight. Claire barely looked up from her phone. "Where's my money?" My voice shook, but not from uncertainty. "Where is the $35,000 from my account?" Silence. My father cleared his throat, his hands clasping together. "Son, we had expenses. The business needed help. It's a loan. Nothing more." A loan. The word felt sour. "You drained 4 years of work. You stole my future. Do not raise your voice to your father." My mother snapped. Claire leaned back on the bed, scrolling lazily. "God, you're dramatic. It's just money." "Just money," I said, incredulous. "What mistakes are you covering? What did you need all that cash for?" The truth spilled out like a confession under pressure. Claire had racked up $12,000 in credit card debt, designer bags, luxury makeup, endless nights out. She had been fined for reckless driving, tickets piling high. She had crashed her previous car while filming herself for social media. And the insurance refused coverage. My parents, desperate to shield her, had used my education fund as the lifeline. I stared at them, my breath coming fast. So you bled me dry to keep her lifestyle afloat. You didn't even ask. It's family money, my father said firmly. Though his voice wavered, family takes care of family. I am family too. I shot back. You're smart, my mother said with a shrug. You'll figure it out. Claire rolled her eyes. Can you wrap this up? I need to finalize our Miami plans. It was in that moment I understood I was not a son, not a sibling. I was a resource, a reservoir they felt entitled to drain. The people who should have lifted me had bound me instead, shackled me to their failures. I walked out of the room, quiet but burning inside. The door closed behind me with a click, and the sound felt final. They thought they had ended the matter, but all they had done was light the fire that would one day consume the fragile world they had built around Claire. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, repeating their words in my head. It's family money. You'll figure it out. It's just money. Each phrase was a knife, and each knife sharpened my resolve. If they believed my silence meant surrender, they had underestimated me. What they had stolen was not just money, it was years of labor. A chance at independence, the trust between blood, and for that, there would be consequences. I would not scream, nor beg, nor plead. I would wait, and I would gather every piece of evidence I could, and when the time came, I would make sure the world knew what they had done. That was the night my resolve hardened. Revenge was no longer a whisper in the dark. It was a promise, carved deep. In the days that followed, I carried myself as if nothing had changed. Outwardly, I smiled, nodded, and kept my head down. But inside, I was restless, the silence in me louder than any words. I knew better than to march back into their room and demand justice. They would only lie, twist, and shrug it away. If I was going to take back what was mine, I needed proof. That was when I reached out to Maya. She and I had met during a grueling part-time shift at a tech startup. Maya was sharp, the sort of person who could read through public filings like others read gossip columns. Her father had once been cheated out of his share in a business partnership, and she had helped track down the evidence that eventually won his case. When I told her my situation, she didn't gasp or fumble. She simply nodded. Then we dig, she said. For 2 weeks we camped out at the public library, spreading laptops and notebooks across wooden tables while the smell of dust and paper lingered in the air. We combed through corporate filings, tax records, and even small claims court databases. Maya taught me how to follow trails, names that repeated, addresses that didn't match, invoices filed twice. The first discovery was my father's company. On paper, Mercer & Co. Events LLC looked stable, but public complaints told another story. Clients accused the business of double booking invoices, billing for services never rendered, even charging for equipment that never arrived. Worse still, the company owed back payroll taxes. The Department of Labor had already flagged them for late payments. Next came the mortgage filing. My parents had taken a second loan against the penthouse apartment, a detail they never breathed to anyone. The numbers made my stomach twist. They were drowning, not waiting. Then we turned our attention to Claire. Her social media was a stage of curated perfection trips. Gifts, luxury brand. But the paper trail told the truth. Using the company's tax ID, she had opened business credit cards. Purchases on those cards matched the very handbags and jewelry she flaunted online. It grew darker. Maya traced payments from local boutiques marked as sponsorships. On paper, they were deals. Businesses paid Claire for influencer posts. But the posts never came. Emails leaked from a disgruntled stylist confirmed she had taken thousands without delivering a thing. Fraud, Maya muttered, tapping her pen against the desk. This isn't just careless. This is chargeback territory. Brands can and will sue. I stared at the evidence spread across the screen, my pulse pounding. They had not only stolen from me, they had built a tower of deceit, so fragile it trembled at the slightest wind. That night, a file arrived in my inbox. Maya had been added to a group chat by an acquaintance who worked with Claire's stylist. It was called Mercer Inner Circle. Screenshots revealed casual arrogance jokes about skipping bills, boasting about using Dad's company card, laughter about free money. And there it was, Claire's message. Bright as a siren if he squeals. I'll say he hacked us. I leaned back, the glow of the screen casting shadows across my face. She wasn't just careless. She was ready to smear me if I dared speak. That was the moment I decided silence was my weapon. Not rage, not shouting, but silence armed with truth. I let them believe I was beaten. I enrolled at the local community college for a semester, picked up extra shifts, and acted the part of the child who would figure it out. But behind that mask, I kept building my arsenal. Every receipt, every leaked chat, every invoice became another brick in the wall I was preparing to bring down. The irony was not lost on me. They had called me dramatic. They had laughed at the idea of consequences. And yet, they had left behind enough threads to weave a noose of their own making. I thought of the words my father had chuckled that night. Good thing that boy is so responsible. He had meant it as a dismissal. But he was right. I was responsible. Responsible enough to gather every piece of evidence. Responsible enough to make sure that when their carefully polished image shattered, it would be by their own hand. I walked home from the library one evening, the city humming around me, and felt the first calm I'd known in weeks. Revenge, I realized, did not always roar. Sometimes it waited. Sometimes it watched. And sometimes it came dressed in silence, carrying evidence instead of anger. The hunt was over. The trap was nearly set. When you are underestimated your entire life, you learn to wear invisibility like a second skin. After I discovered the full extent of what they had done, I could have stormed into that apartment, slammed the documents down, and shouted until my voice went hoarse. But what would that have achieved? They would lie, twist, and shrug it off, just as they had every other time. So instead, I played the dutiful child. I kept my head low, accepted enrollment at the local community college, and picked up shifts wherever I could find them, catering events, delivery runs, even late-night coding contracts. Outwardly, I looked defeated. I let them believe their theft had left me scrambling. Behind that mask, I worked methodically. Maya and I packaged the evidence into neat bundles, each labeled and ready invoices that showed double billing, screenshots of Claire's group chats, copies of bank withdrawals. We studied every channel of exposure: government, business, academic. The goal was not to scream for help, but to whisper into the right ears and let the walls close in on their own. The first whisper went to the state licensing board. We submitted a packet detailing fraudulent invoices, complete with signatures. Within weeks, a notice arrived at my father's office. A formal investigation had begun. His calls grew longer, his shoulders heavier. The second whisper traveled to the Internal Revenue Service. We included tax filings that showed clear discrepancies, paired with proof of unpaid payroll obligations. Soon, letters followed, requesting clarification on return. The third whisper landed in the inboxes of every brand Claire had scammed: boutique owners, small restaurants, even a cosmetics startup. Each received documentation of her agreements, payments, and lack of follow-through. Some were furious, others quietly grateful for the tip. 2 filed complaints with the local fraud division. And then there was the university. Rather than walking into the dean's office myself, I sent an anonymous tip. It included detailed accounts of her academic dishonesty, paired with screenshots of her boasting about cheating. Academic institutions move slowly, but once they do, the gears grind relentlessly. Claire was called in for a review, and when she emerged, her face was pale with fury. She had been suspended pending investigation. I watched all of this unfold from the shadows, saying nothing. At home, I offered sympathetic smiles, nods, and small gestures. When my father slammed a fist on the counter over a lost client, I murmured, "That's tough, Dad." When my mother whispered about bills she could not cover, I patted her hand gently. When Claire screamed that the university was targeting her unfairly, I shook my head and said, "I am sure it will work out." It was almost comical. They were crumbling, yet still saw me as the responsible one, the quiet figure who would carry water while their house burned. The silent pressure mounted. My father lost his biggest contract when word of the licensing board's probe spread among clients. Overnight, $120,000 in annual revenue vanished. My mother's social circle turned cold. Whispers spreading about unpaid debts and corner cutting. Claire's Instagram feed, once filled with cocktails and beaches, grew sparse. She posted vague captions about haters and toxic vibes. But the comments told another story. Former clients demanding refunds, followers asking why her collaborations had disappeared. Then came the leak that set everything aflame. A video, shot at a private party, surfaced on TikTok. In it, Claire laughed with a drink in her hand, bragging about how easy it was to milk brands for cash without ever posting. She clinked her glass, calling herself the smartest scammer in the city. The clip spread fast, picked up by local gossip account. Within days, she lost nearly half her followers. I did not need to post it myself. Someone at the party had done it. But the timing was perfect. The dominoes were falling, and all I had done was nudge them in the right direction. At night, lying in bed, I thought about what revenge truly meant. It was not shouting across the dinner table or demanding they see me. It was this, letting their own arrogance expose them, guiding their lies into the light. And watching them unravel, the silence was my ally. Each smile I gave them was a mask, each nod, a quiet blade. One evening, my father paced the living room, his tie loose, his face drawn. Everything is falling apart, he muttered. My mother sat with her head in her hands. Claire stormed in, phone in hand, yelling about betrayal. I listened, arms folded, my face calm. Inside, I felt the strange calm of inevitability. Their empire of favoritism and deceit was collapsing. And for once, I was not the one left to figure it out. I thought back to that vow I whispered after graduation night. One day, they will see me. Not because they want to, but because I will leave them no choice. That day was no longer a distant dream. It was drawing near, step by quiet step. And when the final blow came, it would not be mine alone. It would be delivered in their own voices, their own confessions. Spoken in desperation. I was patient. Revenge was not a single strike. It was a slow, deliberate symphony. Thanksgiving arrived like a storm. My grandmother insisted on hosting, her invitations handwritten, her table already set with porcelain that had been in the family for decades. It was a holiday meant for gratitude. Yet the air that year was heavy with unspoken debts and unacknowledged sins. By then, the walls had already closed in around my parents and Claire. The licensing board had launched a formal investigation into my father's company. The Internal Revenue Service had issued letters about unpaid taxes, and Claire's suspension from the university had grown into a full academic hearing. Their carefully polished facade of success was cracked wide open. I did not go into that dinner unprepared. My grandparents knew the truth by then. I had sat across from them one evening, explaining what had been done to my education fund, my voice steady though my hands shook. When I told them how much had been taken, my grandfather's face hardened, his jaw set like stone. My grandmother simply pressed my hand, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. They had taken it upon themselves to act not with anger, but with precision. With the help of their attorney, a restitution agreement had been drafted. It detailed every dollar stolen, adjusted for damages, and carried an interest rate of 18% annually. If signed, it would be binding. If refused, criminal and civil complaints would be filed for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. The plan was simple: let my parents and Claire reveal themselves. My grandfather would push just enough, ask the right questions, and capture every word on record. The dinner began with forced cheer, turkey carved, wine poured, polite conversation attempted, but the tension was unmistakable. My father's laugh was hollow. My mother's hands trembled as she passed the gravy boat, and Claire picked at her phone like a shield. Then my grandfather cleared his throat. Before we enjoy dessert, I think it's time we talk about something important, he said. His voice carried the weight of decades. Steady and commanding, he pulled out his phone, placed it openly on the table. For the sake of clarity, I'll be recording this conversation. My parents exchanged nervous glances but nodded. Desperation makes people compliant. Tell me, my grandfather began, his eyes on my father. What happened to the education fund we entrusted to you? My father shifted, sweat beading at his temple. We borrowed from it. The business had expenses. It was temporary. Borrowed, my grandfather repeated, his tone sharp, or stolen. My mother jumped in, her voice high. It was for Claire. She had debts. Legal troubles. We couldn't let her life be ruined. I sat quietly, my heart pounding. While Claire finally looked up from her phone, so what she snapped, rolling her eyes. It's not like he would have done anything exciting with that money. Boring business classes. That's all. At least my life has potential. Her words hit like a slap. Even though I had expected them, my grandmother gasped softly, her hand over her mouth. But the confessions kept spilling. My father admitted to creating false invoices, inflating contracts to generate cash. My mother admitted to covering Claire's shoplifting arrests and paying tutors to alter grades. Claire, her temper fraying, shouted about how she deserved the help, how promises had always been made to her. It was chaos at the table, voices rising, truth spilling like wine across linen. When the storm quieted, my grandfather placed a folder in the center. He slid it across the table, the papers inside neatly bound. This is the restitution agreement, he said flatly. You will repay every dollar you stole, 52,847, plus interest. You will also make a public confession. If you refuse, our attorney will file charges first thing Monday morning. My mother's face drained of color. My father's shoulders sagged. Claire stared as if the room had tilted against her. A public confession, she sneered. Yes, my grandfather said firmly. On every platform where you pretended to shine, your business accounts, your social media, your so-called influence, the truth will be told, or you will face the courts. The weight of the moment pressed down on them. My father reached for a pen, his hand shaking. My mother closed her eyes, whispering something under her breath. Claire slammed her fork down. But even she saw there was no escape. One by one, their signatures filled the page. The days that followed were the most satisfying of my life. My father's business accounts posted public apologies, admitting to fraudulent practices. My mother stood in front of her social circle, confessing to years of deceit. And Claire, with no filters to soften her words, was forced to post a full statement on her Instagram, an admission of scams, dishonesty, and theft. Her follower count plummeted. Comments flooded in betrayal, anger, ridicule. The girl who had once been untouchable was exposed, her crown stripped away by her own hand. And I watched quietly, the silence in me no longer heavy but sweet. They had confessed with their own voices, signed their own admissions, shattered their own image. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. They had made me invisible. But now the world could see. 6 months can pass in the blink of an eye, or it can crawl like a wounded animal. For my parents and Claire, it was the latter. At first, they scrambled, selling furniture, pawning jewelry, whispering frantic pleas to anyone who would listen. They managed to scrape together some payments, but the deadline was relentless. The restitution agreement was a living thing, breathing down their necks, growing heavier each day. I watched from a distance. My father's company collapsed under the weight of investigations. Bankruptcy followed swiftly. The office that once bore his name was shuttered, its windows covered in brown paper. My mother, who had once floated in social circles, now wore a department store apron, clocking double shifts. Claire, stripped of her follower base, faced the harsh reality of probation and a record that closed doors faster than they could open. And yet, they still came to me, knocking on my apartment door, voice trembling. We can't pay it back, my father admitted, his hands shaking. Talk to your grandparents. Buy us more time. My mother wept openly, clutching at my arm. Even Claire, Her arrogance dimmed. Whispered, "I'll work nights. Just don't let them take everything." I listened. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, I said, "You want mercy from me. After you stole years of my work and my future, no. You will finish paying as agreed. Or you will face what comes next." When the deadline passed and the payment still fell short, the consequences unfolded exactly as promised. My father faced federal charges for tax fraud and embezzlement. The sentence was 1 year and 2 months. Claire served 6 months in county jail, followed by probation. My mother received community service and the permanent stain of being named a co-conspirator. It was not my hand that placed them there, it was theirs, guided only by their greed and their arrogance. As for me, I finally transferred to the university I had dreamed of. My first day walking across that campus, the sun bright on the old stone buildings, I felt lighter than I had in years. I carried no resentment, only determination. My GPA soared, and soon a consulting firm offered me a position even before graduation. Through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They attended my lectures when parents were invited, saw a care package during exam weeks, and cheered the loudest when I crossed the stage at commencement. In them, I found the family I thought I had lost. Every so often, I received messages from my parents and Claire, pleas for forgiveness, for reunion, for a chance to rebuild what they had broken. Each time, my answer was the same: I will consider it when the debt is repaid in full. Do I hate them? No. Hate is a weight I refuse to carry. But I do not forget. Trust, once stolen, is not easily returned. Standing now at the threshold of a new life, I see revenge differently. It was never about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself, about showing that their theft did not define me. It was about balance. They had stolen my future. I had taken back the power to decide it for myself. Family, I have learned, is not determined by blood. It is determined by who stands beside you when the storm rages, who believes in you when others turn away. My grandparents were my true family, and with them, I walked into the light of a future I had built with my own hands. As for Claire's words that my money was just numbers on a screen, I carry them still. But as a reminder, numbers matter when they represent sacrifice, when they carry the sweat of years and the faith of those who entrusted you. To dismiss that is to dismiss the very core of honesty. So, when people ask if I would forgive, I tell them this forgiveness is possible, but only when accompanied by accountability. Without that, forgiveness is not healing, it is surrender. And I will never surrender again.